Hey, I hope everyone's doing well. Today I want to talk about another subject that I really don't talk too much about on here, but I really want to kind of get into it and talk about my political beliefs and how my dual beliefs, so I have beliefs from both sides of the aisle, and how they kind of interact and connect and how they kind of define my political viewpoints, excuse me. So let's get right into it and kind of break it down. I know today's world is pretty tense in terms of politics, especially here in the United States, and having a common ground and kind of having that easy political discourse, it's not something that is kind of commonplace. Maybe 10-15 years ago it was a little better, but not so much today. So let's get right into it, and I will kind of walk you through what I believe in, and how some of them may confuse others, but this is what I personally believe in based off my perception and my perspective on how I've kind of came to see the world. So I am a registered Democrat. I have been since I had been eligible to vote when I was 20 years old, when I came off of probation. So, past 10 years, I have voted Democrat in almost every election, whether that's been local, state, federal government level, with the exception in 2016, I actually did vote for Donald Trump. Something, at the time, it was, in my eyes, something that I saw as I would say rather a necessity, and he was kind of like the better of the two candidates in my point of view. But now, as we come to see that today, that is something I would, if I went back in time, I probably would not have done so. He's definitely not a good presidential candidate or a good president just in general. But enough of that, and let's kind of break it down. Again, I'm a registered Democrat, so we're going to start with being pro-life versus pro-choice. And this kind of connects not only to religious beliefs, but into separation of church, separation of state, and etc. So, me being pro-choice, which is how I feel on the issue, which is a liberal position on the issue, versus being pro-life. Specifically, obviously not being a woman, it's very difficult to kind of personally connect to that issue, but I side with that issue because I believe in individuals' rights, in individuals' freedom of choice, and I believe in a separation of church and state. And, especially in the United States here, we have a lot of people on the Republican end who are saying, well, they're pro-life. So they're using the argument of saying, well, we don't want to kill children since they're already technically, they consider them people. So they don't want to kill a fetus. But then again, this defeats the point of saying, well, we need to separate, because there's also people that will bring up the argument of saying, well, they're doing it for religious reasons, but you can't use that argument because we are supposed to be a secular state. We have to separate religion in our state. Me, personally, being a Roman Catholic, but a more liberal Roman Catholic, I believe that all people, it's not just that they're created equally, but that God loves everybody equally, even though they have their faults, even though they make mistakes, even though they may do things that go against the Bible. So I do not believe that God is going to take somebody and damn them into eternal hell because they choose to get an abortion. So, and again, believing in an individual's freedom of choice and an individual's freedom to go out there and have control over their own bodies and to be able to make those choices that benefit their health and their own personal well-being. I believe women within the United States should have the opportunity and the choice to have an abortion whether that's for personal reasons, health reasons, or whatever, whenever they feel like it. I don't believe that the government should be stepping in and controlling the decision of other people. So we have to separate that. We don't live in a society such as one that is dictated by Sharia law, where we should be controlling others' decisions. We don't live in that society. We live in the United States. There should be a secular society. There should be no religions that influence the politics of this country. We should be living based off of the ideals and values set forth by the Constitution and set forth by rules and laws that benefit everybody and everybody as an individual. So, again, being pro-choice, that's my reasoning. Another really prominent issue is universal health care, child care, and education. I believe those are fundamental basic rights. Many Republicans may argue with me, and they have every right to. I mean, we're a free country. You may argue any way you want. But nobody should be, obviously getting cancer is, for example, something that a human being cannot help. Why should they go $100,000, $200,000 in debt to save their own life? That is a taxpayer funded. That should be a taxpayer funded necessity. And those taxes, they should come from tax raises on the richest people in society and corporations. I mean, this has happened once before. We've been able to use high tax rates without scaring off these corporations or wealthy individuals many, many generations ago within the United States, although we did not have the free health care at the time, of course, but we were able to tax at higher rates. So this should be something that is possible today. And of course, taking away liabilities to the government like Social Security or Medicaid. Those are things, Medicaid, which is part of universal health care anyway. But we should not be able to have to make cuts or threaten people's reliance on those just because, we want to benefit the wealthier individuals and corporations in society. And the education and childcare falls into that. If we want to invest in a better, stronger America and put people to work and to grow our economy, well, we should be taking care of not only the educational aspect within the United States. I mean, we have to educate people. We have to encourage people to innovate, to learn, to grow. But we also have to take care of children so that they can move on in life and get that education. But we also have to take care of the women and the parents in general in society so that parents can go to work and not have to rely on spending exorbitant sums of money to make sure that their kid is taken care of while they're at work. Or parents shouldn't have to say, well, only one of us can work because the other has to stay home and take care of the kid, because that hurts the economy in the long run. So, for the economic sake, again, it would be better to tax high net worth individuals and corporations. But of course, that has its own downsides. They could always choose to walk away from the United States if they want to. So, of course, that is a more complex economic issue. And, going from there, of course, is definitely something that takes a lot more discussion. But I'm just giving you a brief overview. I pretty much probably can kind of gain some of my economic perspective as well. But I will also argue in favor of we need to figure out how to bring down the debt and the deficit. Adding to it, as many Democrat politicians may consider like something that they just want to keep on doing and blindly ignoring it can't happen forever. So I do believe in conservative economic stability, but we have to find a way to be able to take care of our people at the same time. So if that makes sense to you, and you're still following along, well, thank you for that. Let's move on to being critical of far-right ideals, like, racism, for example, or far-right Christian ideals and values that kind of tie back to, like abortion rights. I am highly critical of that. Again, religion and state have to keep separated. I also do support LGBTQ plus rights I also support minority rights. I mean, these are the rights of people that have every right in order to exist and to practice whatever they want to practice and live however they want to live within a free society. And nobody should be interfering with that, even though everyone has the right to have their own ideals. You don't have to like a specific group, you don't have to like a specific race or sex or gender or whatever, but you have to learn how to tolerate, you have to learn how to live with them, and you have to learn how to interact with them and to share this country with them so that we can all learn to grow together, so we can continue to protect what we have here in the United States, which is a free, democratic society, so that we can also help grow this country and protect it for future generations. Another some policies, green energy policies, we definitely have to continue to invest in those. Solar, wind power, thermal electricity, hydro as well. Of course, I'm not saying that we should completely get rid of gas, but we have petroleum and natural gas. But we should also, coal, of course, we should start to phase that out. And even nuclear, I'm not really too big of a fan on that. It may be safe for the most part, it may be clean, but when you do have a nuclear disaster, such as Chernobyl, we know how that ends up. So, we need to figure out not only clean, but safe energy. And of course, petroleum can be kept as a reserve or minor amounts, but we should not be over-reliant on it. It's definitely imperative that we keep some petroleum in reserve, especially during emergencies or for the military. Such as the national stockpile. I mean, that is definitely extremely imperative that we do so. But again, we need to start to invest in a better future. We have to protect our environment. Global warming is real. It's not a hoax. So yeah, I mean, this is pretty much like a brief summary of like the major liberal positions that I follow. And that I pretty much a big reason why I support democratic politics. So let me go switch over now, and this will be the conservative politics that I follow, the political positioning, shall I say. A basic one would be the death penalty. Again, the criminal justice system is wrecked. It needs a significant overhaul and reformation, but the death penalty, there are just certain people out there that are serial killers and and such war criminals that it's why should we pay to keep someone like that just sitting in a box for the rest of their life? Essentially there are just some people that we need to keep a death penalty enforced for. That's pretty much just a sum of that. I mean, there's really not much of an argument for that. Another political position, strong military, which is kind of considered a conservative outlook. Cutting military spending down, there's a possibility there. Auditing the military's budget, again, would not object to that. But definitely shrinking the military is, especially with the amount of geopolitical tensions in today's world, and what you may call quote-unquote American decline, we definitely need to invest in our military and keep a strong military that is readily capable at all times. So I will not argue on that point. Conservatives do have it right when it comes to the military. Another one, which is probably the most controversial viewpoint that I do share, is being anti-Islamic extremism and anti-Sharia law. I support a full ban on Sharia law within the United States. That's a whole conversation for another time, another video. And of course, if anyone wants to hear a video on that, just let me know in the comments. We could kind of divest into that, but I'll keep this very brief. Political, just same thing goes with the far right wing, Christianity and neo-Nazis. radical Islam in Sharia law falls into that like same category, where it's a political ideology. I mean, at that point, it doesn't even fall into the category of religion when you go into like far right Islamism. So, supporting groups like Hamas and Hezbollah, so and Al Qaeda and the Taliban and ISIS. I mean, and the Houthis, supporting these groups and supporting their ideologies and their murderous rampages and how they hunt down women and strip women of their humanity and their dignity and their human rights, prey on LGBTQ plus communities within their countries. That is an ideology that has to be stopped at all costs, and we must, as a society, stand up to radical Islam, and we must, as a society, prepare for a future where that could increase, based on not only the growth of some of the countries that we're talking about in terms of the population or the religious aspect, which is kind of depending on where you look at it, especially in places like in Western Europe where those ideologies amongst the immigrant populations are seemingly kind of growing over time. So it's really I would say a cancerous ideology, and I understand people may be upset at that, but it is what it is, and it's fair to label it as that. It is a truth that it's a hard truth to break for many, but it is a truth that must be told. We have to stop it, and I'm not damning in any way liberal people that in the liberal aspect of Islam. There's many great people out there that practice Islam that want no part of what we see on the television or we see in many of these Middle Eastern countries or Western Europe. But again, just like radical Christianity, radical Islam, or any form of religion or form of political group that is radicalized has to be stopped at all costs. And I also do support another conservative point. I'm gonna finish it up with this is crime and policing. Now, I kind of forgot to mention this back in the liberal policies that I support. And in terms of policing, we need extensive reformation in policing. We need to weed out the bad eggs. We need to overhaul and train. We need to remove a lot of this good old boy structure that is kind of intertwined with policing. And we really need to have police officials start answering to civilians, like a civilian review board in a sense. It's too politicized. It's too intertwined with politics in its own self in the ranks, and we really need to get in there and reform police departments throughout the country and the whole culture of policing and what it means to be able to adequately police communities. All of that has to be changed. Of course, better training. Throwing an officer in an academy for a few months and then throwing them on the streets with a few weeks of training, that isn't helping. For someone like me, for example, who grew up in an impoverished inner city, it may be easier for me to, if I was a police officer, for example, to kind of acclimate myself into a community. But there are many officers that are not coming from the communities that they police, and I've witnessed that firsthand. And it's very hard for them to get in there and actually see the people in that community as equals to themselves and be able to adequately police that with compassion and respect. So, of course, we need a complete overhaul of policing, but at the same time, we also need to crack down on law and order. The crime rates throughout this country, especially in terms of thefts and violent crimes, they may be going down in some spots, but since COVID, they have been up, and we really need to stop it. The car break-ins, the thefts, the armed robberies, the shootings, the illegal guns. We have to figure out how to resolve this. The crime rate in this country is something that is, in terms of, first world, that term's kind of outdated, but we'll use it, first world nations, the crime rate in the United States is just absurd. And we really need to come to a resolution, and we have to stop treating policing and law and order as something that we're kind of, walking on eggshells around because we're afraid to upset politicians or people within the community. We really need to all work together to police our cities and to make sure that everybody has access to fair policing that represents all people. But at the same time, we have to make sure that criminals, become responsible for their actions, and to not let them off easy, and to actually show people in the community that this is what will happen if you continue to commit violent crimes, but at the same time educating people and working alongside the community so that we can better assist the people within the community and to kind of just create an entire program of one-on-one helping. So I know it can be complex. It's easier said than done, but it can be done. And, if we all work together as a nation and to get together and to put all our differences aside so that we can actually build a United States that, is worth kind of putting on show for the rest of the world, that we can do it. But it all just kind of falls into place when we want it to, and the more that we continue to argue and we continue to divide ourselves, the harder that reach becomes. And unfortunately, we are getting to a point where there may not be a return to this kind of equilibrium, but I'm not saying it's impossible. It can be done, but politics today are pulling us apart more than ever. And I just wish everyone the best of luck, and hopefully everyone out there can get along and listen to this video and kind of see where you fit inside of it, and where you kind of what you agree with and what you don't agree with. And of course, always let me know in the comments if I missed something, or if you don't agree with something, or you do agree, or whatever the case is. But yes, till next time, I hope you enjoyed the video. Like, subscribe for more content.